And I think we can go ahead and get rolling. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome back to my channel. So you can tell from the setup of this video that it's a little bit more relaxed in terms of my usual videos. I am filming this directly after day job and actually trying to get a couple of things done in between, but this is a reshoot of a video that I wanted to do for the channel, but unfortunately lost the footage with respect to the SD card that I had for my that was corrupted. So what I am doing is I'm refilming this particular video on my laptop because we are going to do a screen recording and we are going to do a tier ranking video. So this will be the first tier ranking video that I have on my channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. And I'm going to do this as a part of the one of the videos that I had promised commemorating 100 subscribers on the channel, which y'all have already surpassed what I was expecting in terms of having followers for the channel. As of the recording of this video, I think it's over now 200 subscribers to my respective BookTube channel. Thank all of you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate your support and your time to to chat with me about bookish things in the comments, as well as watching my videos and just in general engaging with me on BookTube. I feel very humbled by all the likes and the subscribes and just in general being a part of BookTube and being welcomed to the community. So thank you so much. I will probably try to do this, try to do something similar to this when I hit the next milestone, which I have not decided what that's going to be. Maybe we'll look at 350 subscribers and maybe I'll see what I can do in terms of a commemoration video for that, but that we'll see where it goes. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get this tier ranking video started, and I hope you all enjoy. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started on this. So to kind of start off this tier ranking video, I'm going to just generally give an overview of what tiers I have created for this respective list. This is not a comprehensive list of young adult fantasy or sci-fi titles. These were just ones that I picked at random. Some of them are very popular series. Some of them are series that I read as a teenager that I really enjoyed. And some of these are ones that I feel like they're either on my TBR, I highly anticipate reading them, or I would like to be able to, or I've read at least a little bit of it to be able to make an evaluation on these particular series. So essentially what we're going to do for this particular video is go through each of these one by one. I have a number of categories that I'm sorting these through. S tier is all-time favorites. These are my all-time favorite series that I enjoy within YA fantasy or sci-fi. A tier is series that I love or enjoy in general. They're not my all-time favorites, but I really enjoy them and I love coming back to them. B tier is essentially series that I like, but they have caveats to them that I took issue with in some form or fashion, but otherwise I respect them for what they are. C tier series are usually not my cuppa. I would say that I could probably do without them, that like they just weren't for me. It's not that I dislike them, but I just know that they weren't what I expected them to be for what they offered. D tier is dead on arrival, unfinished. I will not be picking up these series ever again. Did not like them, did not find anything that I really cared for in terms of the particular series that they have. And then there's the last tier, which is series that I want to read, finish that I probably started but haven't come back to in quite some time. So we are going to start off with one of the most popular YA series of all time, Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. And this is one that I think I can really say that this was definitely not my cuppa. And I know a lot of people have polarizing opinions about the Twilight series. It is a popular series, and I understand the appeal of it to a lot of teens, even for as long as it has been written in terms of the YA genre. And like, for better and worse, Twilight is a series that put YA on the map in a very different scope for what it was able to do within the spectrum of young adult literature. But for my purposes, in terms of me picking up, I picked this up a little bit before the movie was one of the first movies was released in the series. I think it was like just right before the first Twilight movie was released, and I read it for myself. I read through the whole original four-book series. I read Midnight Sun, and I can safely say that it is not a series that I would really come back to. I did not love many of the aspects that were in Twilight. There were things about it that I could at least appreciate in terms of why it appeals to teens the way that it does. But for me personally, it just was not my cuppa. So we're going to leave it at that. I think C tier is being pretty generous considering some of the things that happened in the series. It's not one that I would put in D tier because I did finish the series, at least up to the point that it's been written so far, but it's just generally not my cup of. Next series that I want to talk about is the His Dark Material series, which starts with The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. And this is one that I would say that this is S tier for me because I started reading this particular series. It starts with The Golden Compass. It follows up with The Subtle Knife, as well as The Amber Spyglass is the last book in the original trilogy. Now, there's a spin-off series that I have not had the opportunity to pick up in terms of Philip Pullman's work following Lyra as she's an adult, but for the original trilogy, the original book I picked up when I was about, like, when it was published. I believe the first book was published in 1995, so I was a kid when I picked it up. It was cross-marketed as, YA. Some could probably argue that it could technically fall under middle grade fantasy, but I would say that this is a pretty solid YA series in terms of following the adventures of Lyra Silvertongue. So deeply immersive and just really well done in terms of what it did for the overarching series. I know it has a lot of controversy with some of its themes, particularly in terms of criticisms of certain religious themes, but I thought it was very well done and very immersive, and it's just one of my all-time favorites. It was one of the fantasy series that really got me into fantasy. Not the only one, but definitely one of the first that I can remember in terms of reading in which it became my all-time favorite series. And I remember essentially going to the bookstore when each of the different books were released, like highly anticipating picking up each of the different releases and being able to devour those books probably within a matter of hours. So it's one of my all-time favorites. Definitely feel good about rating it S tier. Let's go with another very popular YA series that is YA dystopia fantasy, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which is a trilogy. The original trilogy starts with The Hunger Games, and then it goes into Catching Fire and then Mockingjay. So this is a series that I really enjoyed when it first came out, and I remember just reading this series back to back to back in terms of how it immersed me as a YA dystopian novel. I thought the themes that were very well done. There were some caveats that I thought did detract me from the series a little bit in terms of stuff, but it's an iconic series for a reason, and I really enjoyed it for what it offered. I have no problem putting this in A tier. Next series that I want to mention is the Daughters of the Moon series by Lynn Ewing. And this is a YA fantasy series which has some mythological aspects to it. This is a series that very few people that I know actually recognize because of how long ago it was published. It was published originally, the first book, Goddess of the Night, in the Daughters of the Moon series. It's a 13-book series, and it also has a spin-off series called The Sons of the Dark. It was originally published back in 2000, and I was a teenager when I read this book for the first time. And I remember picking up several books in the series and just devouring it for following the diverse cast of characters, the different adventures that they go on, the dramas that unfold between the characters, all of it. I can understand definitely why it was such an appealing series for what it offered. The urban fantasy aspects, the mythological building, the world building, it was appealing to me at the time that I read it as a teenager. If I were to rank it in terms of based on my enjoyment of it, some aspects of it, revisiting it, do not age that well. And I do plan on rereading the series from the beginning and also giving my full thoughts about the series and its impact on me. This is a series that I would say I can safely put it in B tier as a series that I like, but it has its caveats. But I feel pretty comfortable giving it B tier. I probably read about 9 or 10 of the books in the series of the 13 books that are in the series, so I have a good idea of what it's about. But I would say definitely I would put it in B tier. Next book that I want to, or next series that I want to mention here is Garth Nix's series that is considered a classic in so many ways. I read this as a teenager also, but it's one that I have not finished the series in quite some, like I have not finished the entire series, but I read enough of it to recall it and for it to have left an impression on me. This is Garth Nix's The Abhorsen or the Old Kingdom series, and it starts with Sabriel, which I think a lot of people have had the opportunity to read. It's a classic. I think the very first time that I experienced this particular series, it was read in the audiobook version by Tim Curry, who gave a wonderful performance of this overall that has stuck with me over the years in terms of things. And I really want to revisit this particular series. I think I've read the first two books in this series, so it's not that I really like. I do want to finish the series overall, but I feel pretty good about putting this in A tier for the way that it immersed me. I would even probably put it over The Hunger Games. So let me see if I can switch those out. Yeah, there we go. So I feel pretty comfortable with my memories of Sabriel in terms of the impact that it had on me, as well as how I enjoyed it. I feel comfortable putting it in A tier. Next book that I want to feature is, or the next series that I want to feature is a very little known series as well, though I remember devouring several of the books in it. This is by a very popular author named Cynthia Voigt. A lot of people don't realize that this is a fantasy series, and this is one that was written by the author of the very popular Homecoming series. So this was a fantasy series written by Cynthia Voigt, and I believe it begins with, okay, so it's called the Tales of the Kingdom series. And it's a series that begins with the novel Jackaroo. followed up by one of my favorite novels in the series, On Fortune's Wheel. So I used that thumbnail to essentially be the representation of it because that was one of the books that made a huge impact. I mean, you don't have to read the Tales of the Kingdom series in order. I would consider it to be historical fantasy, epic fantasy, and with romantic elements and things like that in terms of what it's essentially about. I can definitely revisit this particular series on the channel for anyone who's interested in learning more about it if you haven't already read it. And if you have read it, I would love to know your thoughts about it because I barely hear anyone talking about the Tales of the Kingdom series by Cynthia Voigt. It's a series that is, you can read them as standalones, but it's in the same interconnected universe. And it was written originally back in, I believe, 1990. Okay, so Fortune's Reel was written in 1990, but Jackaroo was written in 85. Okay, so this is an older series that even spans even longer than I expected it to be. So, but this is one that really stuck with me, one that I liked for what it offered. I've read 3 books in the series. So, Jackaroo was the first one, Unfortunate's Wheel was the second, and I believe, let's see, The Wings of a Falcon is the third book in the series. It is a total of 4 books. Okay, so I read more of the series than I thought I did. Okay, so if I had to go on the strength of what impact this series had on me in terms of being a reader, I don't expect very many people to actually know what this series was, but I did enjoy it for what it offered. I feel good about putting it as a B tier series I like, but with some caveats. I definitely want to revisit that though, but I remember being a kid, moving into a teenager, and this being a series that was recommended to me for the fantasy elements of it, the historical fantasy elements of it, and it really connected with me, especially with respect to On Fortune's Wheel, which stood out in my mind. So that's definitely one that I would comfortably put it behind the Daughters of the Moon series by Lin Yuang in terms of how it impacted me. So B tier, I feel pretty good about it. So we have Golden Compass at S, the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman at S tier so far. The A Portion series, the Old Kingdom series by Garth Nix as A tier. Hunger Games right behind it as A tier. Daughters of the Moon B tier. Tales of the Kingdom behind Daughters of the Moon at B tier, and then Twilight, not my cup of so far. So I think I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what these series are about. We can actually go into more of that in later videos in terms of actually talking about each of these particular YA and sci-fi series in terms of the impacts that it's had on me and what I thought about each of the books in the series later on. So we're just gonna keep going, go rapid fire, and try to do these as quickly as possible. Next one that I want to feature is the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness. This is the series that starts with The Knife of the Never Letting Go. I remember loving this series. It's a series that hurt for many reasons in terms of what happens in the series, respectively to the characters. But I remember really loving this YA dystopia fantasy. I'm trying to decide where I would put this respectively. It does have caveats, and I don't know if I would put it. I guess I wouldn't necessarily say this is a series that I enjoyed, and it definitely stuck with me, like in terms of impact. I don't know whether I would put it under A tier or B tier. You know what? Let's go with A tier because I'm thinking essentially of how it impacted me in terms of YA dystopian novels that stuck with me over the years and impacted. And I love Patrick Ness's writing as a whole in terms of really introducing me to his respective books. And in terms of like my history of reading YA, I think I'm good with putting it as A tier in terms of the Chaos Walking trilogy as a whole. Put it behind Sabriel and the Hunger Games in terms of the A tier. So I feel pretty good about that. So the next book that I want to feature is the series that starts with A Song Below Water, and I believe the series is called A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. This is a series that I actually want to read. I have not gotten to it yet, so I will put that under series I want to read or finish. So I feel pretty comfortable. I do, like definitely a strong and very popular series about mermaids that I know a lot of people have enjoyed, that I've heard from in terms of my peers, and they keep telling me you need to read this series, not now but right now, and I definitely want to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Next series that I want to highlight is the A Blade So Black trilogy, which is by L.L. McKinney. I have read two books in this respective series. This is urban fantasy, a unique retelling of Alice in Wonderland, featuring a strong black protagonist who is drawn into a world that's like basically like a combination of Wonderland, and has references to Sailor Moon, and just has a lot of different elements of it that are really appealing. I'm not 100% sure where I would put this particular series. Like it's a good series, and I actually enjoyed a lot of aspects and elements into it. The only thing about it that I would say that kind of takes away from the series, the world building is not as fully fleshed out as I would like it to be. So it's one that I know I like, but it's not something that I would put as S tier, and I go back and forth between putting it in A tier and B tier because there are elements of it that I love, but they don't necessarily connect with me in the same way as some of these other series have. So yeah, I'm torn about that. Hmm. And I've rated the series pretty highly, like in terms of like being really high tier, 4 stars for both the first book as well as the second book. I thought that the second book was actually a little bit stronger than the first book in terms of establishing the world and the characters and the overarching conflict. So what should I put this under? So I would say either A tier or B tier, but I'm trying to decide where I should put it, respectively. Let's put it under B tier, and I can put it in between the Daughters of the Moon series and On Fortune's Wheel. Yeah, I think that feels right in terms of the impact that it had on me in terms of when I was picking it up, and my enjoyment of it. I think it sits pretty well there. So I would put it in B tier. So far we have one in S tier, three in A tier, three in B tier, one in Not My Cuppa, no so far in DOA or unfinished, and then one in series I want to read or finish. So let's keep going. Let's see. The next book that I want to feature is Across the Universe by Beth Revis. This is a YA sci-fi romance. I believe I read two books in this series. It has been a long while since I picked this up, and I believe the first book in the series, Across the Universe, was published back in 2011, so it has been a long time since I've picked up Across the Universe. It was not. I enjoyed the first two books for what they offer, but is not one of my favorite series. I think I'm comfortable with saying that I like the first book in the series enough to put it in B tier, but it is probably one of the lower ones on B tier that I would reflect upon. So I don't really have Too much to say about this series in terms of what it's about. I thought it was fine, but it just wasn't one of the series that I would say that I liked from the first two series. I do plan on finishing it. It is a trilogy, and I know I have not read the third book, which I believe is called Shades of Earth, which is the third book in the series. I remember distinctly. So I do plan on picking that series back up. I read two books of it. B tier, may go down into C tier depending, but we'll see. We'll see compared to some of the other ones that are on this list. Let's see. So the next is the Gemma Doyle trilogy, which starts with The Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. I love, adore Libba Bray. I read part of the first book in this series and enjoyed it, but I have not finished it. So this is definitely one that I would put under a series I want to read or finish. So I'll leave that where it is. Next book that I want to feature is the Anna series, which starts with Anna Dressed in Blood and finishes up with Girl of Nightmares. I believe it's a duology. I adore young adult ghost stories, and Anna was one of my absolute favorites. So this is one that I think I can put comfortably in A tier, and it may surprise some people in terms of how much I loved Anna Dressed in Blood, but to this day, in terms of Kendare Blake's respective written works, that is my absolute favorite of everything that she has written. So I feel pretty confident putting it behind, well, within the A tier ranking. I'm not sure if I may change up the rankings of it, but I think it feels pretty good in A ranking. Next one is the Dustlands trilogy by Moira Young. I remember distinctly the hype that came with Blood Red Road, which is the first book in that particular series. And the first two books, I would say, for this YA dystopian series really appealed to me, but the final book in that respective series, unfortunately, was not one of my favorites. I think it actually dropped the ball for how well it was set up for the first two books. And I did complete the trilogy. I read all three books within it. So it was one that I really liked as a dystopian novel, but I was disappointed by the ending in terms of things. So I feel pretty comfortable with putting it in B tier. I just don't know where in the spectrum of things it would be in B tier compared to the rest of these. I think I actually like the Dustland series a little bit more than Across the Universe. So I feel pretty comfortable putting it before that. But I think On Fortune's Wheel or the Tales of the Kingdom series, Blade So Black, and Daughters of the Moon feel better, like in terms of ranking above it, just because of how it appealed to me in terms of the appeal of the series. So yeah, Dustlands feels pretty good going before Across the Universe. Next up is the Brooklyn Brujas series, which starts with Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova. I have not read all of the series, so this is definitely one that I want to say is among the series that I want to read and finish. So that is a very quick pick for this. Next one is the Iron Fae series by Julie Kagawa. Very classic YA Fae inspired fantasy that has stuck with me for many years. I've read every book in the series in terms of the main four books for that particular series. It has a couple of follow-up series that come progressively after it. I've also read the novellas associated with this series. I feel very comfortable putting this under series that I love or enjoy because of how well it was done. I was very taken in by Megan's respective journey, loved following Puck, loved following Ash, all of the characters in this respective series, even especially following Megan's pursuit of trying to find her little brother Ethan in the Fae world was very compelling. So I would say definitely it goes in A tier for me in terms of YA series, and also just because I like Fae inspired series, and I think that was one of the strongest ones that I came across. Next one I want to say is the Caraval series by Stephanie Gruber, I believe, is the author for that. I have not finished the respective series. I do plan on reading it, so I'm just going to put it here. I did like the first book well enough to be able to can resume the series, but I don't remember it well enough to be able to rank it among the other ones that I have. Next is the Cemetery Boy series by Aiden Thomas. Only one book of this respective duology, I believe, has been released in YA, and this was one of my all-time favorite books, written and read last year. I feel very confident of putting this in A tier so far. So that will definitely, it will definitely depend on seeing where the series goes, but I feel comfortable with ranking it as an A tier series for me. I don't, I think it's so recent that I can't put it above some of these other ones that I have read already, but I think it feels very comfortable being in A tier for right now. Next one that I want to highlight is, and it's interesting that I have the cover for Clockwork Princess up on here, but this is the Infernal Devices trilogy by Cassandra Clare. This is the only fantasy series by Cassandra Clare that I have been able to finish, and it is also the only one that I liked. So I would say I go back and forth between either putting this as a series that I like but caveats, or not my cup of, because Cassandra Clare's writing is not my cup of tea at all, and I'm not really interested in reading anything else she writes beyond the two series that I have tried to read from her. It's personal preference. I'm just going to leave it at that. I do think that some of my opinions of her have been skewed by some of the things that she's said and done on social media as well. So she's not an author that I would really pick up anything else from due to that. But from the respective series that I have picked up from her, I picked up Mortal Instruments. I finished two books of that, of the original trilogy, and then I finished reading all of the Infernal Devices. I think I'm comfortable with putting this up in front of Across the Universe in B tier, just because I actually liked aspects of that series, but I did not love it enough to be able to pick up more of Cassandra Clare's work, because I found certain elements to be derivative. And while I thought it ended very strongly with Clockwork Princess, Clockwork Princess is my favorite of the three books, and the way that it ties its respective ending was fine for that particular series, especially with its steampunk elements. And I love steampunk elements. I love romance. I love time travel, or like time period set fantasy, which essentially all of those elements are within Clockwork Princess, but or the Infernal Devices trilogy. But for me, it was not one of the stronger YA series that I have personally picked up. So I feel like it was fine for what it was. B tier seems to suit it fine for me, but it had a lot of caveats. So I will leave that one where it is. Next one that I want to feature is one by Freeman Jones, who also goes by Alan Freeman Jones. This is the Warrior Princess series. I remember reading this a long time ago. It was quite some time ago, essentially, and I remember reading the first two books of it. I have the whole series of it in my library, and I do plan on finishing the last book in the series. I read two of the books in the respective series, but have not finished it. I feel comfortable enough putting it in B tier because I did enjoy it, but it had quite a few caveats. And in terms of things, it did not really age well with some of the elements in it. I liked it, but it wasn't one of my all-time favorite series. I enjoyed it for what it offered, and I do think I want to finish the series to be able to see where it ends up. It may go up in ranking, it may go lower. I don't know quite yet, but I feel pretty good about putting it in B tier. Next one is a very, very popular YA series, fantasy, dystopian, Divergent by Veronica Roth. I have read all three of the main books in this series, and I think I feel comfortable with putting it in Not My Cup. It hasn't aged well for me in terms of my enjoyment of dystopian series, and I think of the series that I have revisited in terms of YA, Divergent is not one of the stronger ones in terms of ones that I have gone back to. It's okay. I understand why people like it. I essentially feel about it the same way I feel about Twilight. I understand its appeal, and I understand that, and there are certain elements of it that I actually did like. But as far as comparing it to other series in terms of young adult literature, in terms of fantasy and sci-fi, I would say that this is not as strong as some of the other ones that I have ranked above it. So I'm just going to leave that one where it is. Next one that I want to feature is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. This is a alternate fantasy series that features a girl who is fighting zombies, and I really enjoyed the first book of that series, and I've read part of the second book in the duology. It was very entertaining. I love young adult zombie novels, and this was a very interesting and very different book within the YA spectrum in terms of what it chose to showcase. And the strong protagonist is one of the things that really stuck out in my mind with respect to Dread Nation. So I would say that this, in terms of my enjoyment of it, I enjoyed Dread Nation actually more than a Blades. I can put it comfortably in B tier, behind Goddess of the Night, or behind the Daughters of the Moon series by Lin Yuang, and before A Blade So Black, because I thought that the construction of Dread Nation in terms of the way that it did its respective action sequences, in terms of the main character, in terms of how the story beats of that particular series appealed to me. It definitely a series that I like. It had a few caveats to it, but I really, really enjoyed it for what it offered. So I'm just going to leave that where it is. And I feel pretty good about it, actually. So I would say it's historical fantasy, alternate history fantasy with zombies is the best way that I would um, describe Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, with a black protagonist who is really a joy to follow in that respective series. Next one is Aragon, DOA and Unfinished. I read the first book in Aragon, and I can say that for me, it felt derivative. I read it when I was older, and I know that a lot of kids grew up with this respective series. I read the first book and I just couldn't continue it, so I left it unfinished. It wasn't my cup of tea. Though I would say, do I want to put it in DOA unfinished, or do I want to put it in Not My Cuppa? Let's put it in Not My Cuppa, and we can put it behind Divergent. But I really just did not care for the first book in that respective series, and I told myself it was a bit overlong, overwritten, and I understand how young Christopher Paolino he was when he originally wrote this respective series, and how it impacted a lot of fantasy reading for a lot of teenagers and kids. But for me, personally, I was actually more intrigued by other books within the same vein, like the Bartimaeus series and other ones in terms of featuring dragons. I could say even like individual books like Seraphina by Rachel Hartman actually appealed to me a little bit more than Aragon. So I would say essentially for the respect of this, I won't put it in D tier. I'll put it in C tier as not my cup, but even though I think I either gave this 1.5 stars or 1 star for the first book of Aragon. I couldn't finish it. So I think I'll just leave that where it is and I'll just say it's not my cuppa. Just respectfully spoken. Next book that I want to feature is a Western dystopia that I said that was one of my favorites for 2022. I love this respective series. I think I feel pretty good about putting the Good Luck Girls in A tier. And I think it would be fine behind Cemetery Boys because it's a duology. I have read the first book in the Good Luck Girl series. I am very much looking forward to the second book in the series, which I hope to pick up pretty soon, probably sometime this year. Yeah, I think like I feel pretty good with putting it behind Cemetery Boys in terms of a duology that was very strong in its first installment. It may go a little bit higher on the A tier. It may even go to S tier depending on how the or it even may go to B tier depending on how the second book is in the series in terms of when I pick it up and how I think about it. But I feel pretty good about putting it here. So we'll leave it at that. Graceling is a by Kristen Kishore. I read the first two in this respective series, and it's an ongoing series. I recall enough of it to say that I can comfortably put this in B tier. I would say that maybe from the first two books of this series, it could go before Dustlands in terms of the appeal. I really enjoyed it, but I still need to read more of it in order to have an impression on it. I really enjoyed the first two books, and I think it was a series that came before its time, but I still need to read more of it in order to see where it would be between A tier and B tier. But I feel pretty good about putting it in B tier for right now in terms of my impressions of Graceling. And I know a lot of people love that particular series. So I definitely plan on picking up more of them, and I'll leave it at that. Next one I want to feature is the Half Bad trilogy by Sally Green. This was written a while back ago. It has LGBTQ representation and is about witches. I did not care for this series. I think the way that this series particularly ended left a bad taste in my mouth. So I think I am comfortable with putting this in DOA. The action sequences, the characters were fine. What I did not like about it was how brutal it was towards its main character, and essentially the way that it ended is very infamous in the YA community for how long ago it was written. I know that it was adapted into a Netflix series, which has since been canceled, and I've heard better things about the um, the Netflix series that it's based on. I forgot the name of the particular series. It's not called Half Bad. I'll put um, the poster for it for your reference in terms of the name of the series, but I've heard good things about the series and the representation of it, but it was unfortunately canceled. But that particular series left such a bad taste in my mouth with how it ended that I just could not come back to it. So for me, it's dead on arrival. It's not, I did finish the trilogy and I did read the side stories for it, but I would not go back to that series, respectively spoken. Let's see, the next one that I want to feature is House of Night by PC and Kristen Cast. This is another one that I would put under the D tier, Dead on Arrival, because I reached up to the fifth book in the series and I told myself that I could not continue with it in terms of Despite how popular it is with a lot of people in terms of following the adventures of Zoe Redbird, there's so much about it in terms that does not age well in terms of the representation of the characters, the infuriating aspects of certain things with respect to each of these characters. I could not continue it past the fifth book. And I've heard some people have finished the series. I believe it's a 13-book series, and they essentially told me, Rose, just don't even bother. It doesn't get better after the fifth book. You know, it is what it is. I think I can appreciate in terms of how the appeal of it is to the way that it handles magic and the lore of certain elements of it. But there are really just so many more better YA series that have better representation and better appealing aspects in the vein of magic. So I will leave that series where it is, and I think I'm okay with leaving it alone. Next one I want to feature is the YA series Life as We Knew It, which starts with Life as We Knew It. This is a series by Susan Beth Pfeiffer. I forgot the name of the series that this is. It's a 4-book series which features kind of an end of the world dystopian setting in which it follows the teenage characters after the moon gets knocked out of alignment, and essentially like it changes a lot of the things that are happening within the world, and essentially you're following teenagers who are trying to survive that particular occurrence. I thought this was okay. I read 2 or 3 books in the series and thought it was fine for what it offered, but it really just wasn't my cup of tea. I liked it better than I would say that it fits comfortably behind Aragon in terms of the appeal of the series. When I think about it in retrospect, I liked certain elements of it, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And especially from what I've heard about the 4th book in the series, it just did not end on a great note. So I finished 3 books of the 4-book series, and I determined for me it just wasn't my cup of, so I'll leave that where it is. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I will admit I am biased in terms of Legendborn because I really did enjoy the first book in the series. I have not read the second book quite yet, and it's hard for me to rate this because I feel like I want to read more of the books in the series. It definitely appealed to me in the first book in the series, and I saw what the author was trying to do with respect to following the adventures of Bree in this dark academia, which is taking place on the campus of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, like the references that were made for the university and the environment, and also following the young character and with respect to the secret society that she's in. I liked it enough to be able to follow it and enjoyed the story for what it offered, as well as it being a King author's retelling. But where I want to rank it in with respect to each of these, I don't feel comfortable enough ranking it A tier or B tier in terms of, because I want to read more of it. I really enjoyed the first book, but I don't feel comfortable with ranking it, so I will say that this is a series that I want to finish, and I will leave it for there for now because I've heard mixed opinions about the second book in the series. We will see where it goes. We will definitely see where it goes, but I did enjoy the first book in the series, but I do feel like I want to reread Legendborn and also read Bloodmart in conjunction with it to be able to see where it goes and then where it lands across my tier ranking. So I will leave it there for now. Next up, one that I want to feature is Children of Blood and Bone. I have not read enough of this to have an opinion on it, so it will be a series I want to read and finish, and I will leave it at that. Tony Adeyemi, a lot of people have had mixed opinions about Children, Blood and Bone. People say that the first book was stellar, but the second book was not. and I don't want to form an opinion of it like until I finish reading the whole trilogy because it is so divisive. And I've heard a lot of people say that they were vastly disappointed by the second book in the series. So I do want to reserve judgment to finishing that series, at least with respect to the first two books, and then maybe possibly waiting until the third one comes out. Once the third one comes out, I will probably read that in a marathon and give you my thoughts about it in a video on this channel. So we'll see where it goes. Next one I want to feature is the Raid Bearer series, which is a duology by Jordan and Foucault. That is a series that I want to finish. I have started Raid Bearer. I have not finished it, but I definitely want to finish this duology. I've heard great things about it. My level of excitement of it, I will probably put this at the very top for a series I want to finish. So since it's only a duology and since it's so appealing in terms of the world building and the characterization, I definitely want to put that on the top of my list. Next up is Red Queen. This is a series that I have read 3 books of, as well as a novella, maybe one of the novellas, I believe, with it, DOA. I did not like that series at all, and I stopped reading it before I could get to the 4th book in that particular series. It was not my cup of tea at all. I could not relate to Mare. There are a lot of characters that I actually did relate to who ended up being killed off of that respective series, and it frustrated me so very much to the point where I was like, by the end of the 3rd book, I just did not care enough to finish it. So I will leave that where it is. I know a lot of people were frustrated with Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I don't know if I want to pick up anything else by Victoria Aveyard yet. We shall see. I was really turned off by the Red Queen series enough to say, yeah, I was done with that particular series. But you know, we'll see how it goes. If the next book that Victoria Aveyard writes does appeal to me and I pick it up and I decide to follow it, I will let you all know. Next book that I want to feature is the Shadow Shaper series by Daniel Jose Older. This is one of my all-time favorite series. I think single-handedly I can put this in S tier. It was so good for following the protagonist in an urban fantasy setting. I love the characters. I love the magic system in this particular trilogy. It's a strong trilogy. I've read 2 books of the 3 in this series. It was very well done in the audiobook versions. I tried to recommend that series to everybody that I know. Essentially, it is definitely one of my all-time favorites, and I love the protagonist. I love the world building. I love everything about it so much. I definitely look forward to being able to review. I've reviewed the 1st book in the series. I don't believe I've reviewed the second yet, and I definitely plan on reading the 3rd book in the trilogy for myself, but is one of my all-time favorites, and I love it so much. Next one is 6 of Crows. So I feel comfortable enough, and this is probably going to be a surprise to a lot of people, but I feel comfortable putting this in A tier for the level of the characterization, the world building, the duology of 6 of Crows in terms of where it is in the Grisha verse, as well as like it starts with 6 of Crows and it ends up with Crooked Kingdom. Both of those books were very strong for what they offer. I have not written a review of this particular duology on my Goodreads or on my blog yet, which I really need to remedy. I want to reread this duology from the beginning and let you know my thoughts about it. But in terms of my overarching thoughts about like the characters and how it connected with me and things like that, how well it was done for YA fantasy duology, 6 of Crows and Crooked Kingdom were very solid. So I would definitely say, do I want to put it, in terms of ranking, where do I want to put this? Good question. Do I want to rearrange this at any point? We'll leave it there for right now. In terms of impact on me personally, it sits well pretty high on the A tier, so I feel pretty good about putting it in A tier, but it may move. We shall see. I will move on. These Broken Stars. This is a series by Megan Spooner and Amy Kaufman, if I remember correctly. I thought it was fine. I have not finished this series. I don't feel comfortable enough with um, putting this series as a ranking since I have not finished it. So I will put it in series I want to read and finish. It is considered YA sci-fi romance. It takes place in space and follows the two teens respectively. I enjoyed it for what it was offered, but I read it a long time ago. So I think it's one that I would definitely want to go back and revisit to be able to finish the series, the respective trilogy for what it offered, but it has been a long time since I picked up that series, so I will keep it there for right now. The Diviners by Libba Bray. That's a series that I want to finish. I don't have, like, I haven't read enough of it to be able to form an opinion of it, so I will put it in the series I want to finish. Same thing with The Haunting of Sunshine Girl. I believe this is by, I think this was by Paige McKenzie, if I remember correctly, and it is a ghost story. I have a particular weakness to YA ghost stories, as you can probably tell by my high ranking of Anna Dressed in Blood here, but I love YA fantasy ghost stories with elements of horror, things like that. So definitely it's one that I consider to be like, fantasy, horror, paranormal. It's definitely one that I want to pick up and be able to finish. So I will leave it at that. And then I have, okay, so this is a duplicate. So this is um, the Infernal Devices trilogy. I think I just included two images of from the same series. So I said that I actually liked Clockwork Princess more than Clockwork Angel, so I'll just put it here. But those two are from the same series. Ignore me in terms of how it's the let's see. So the Iron Fae Call of the Forgotten by Julie Kagawa starts with the Lost Prince. And I've talked about this particular series on my channel before in terms of how much I loved it with respect to the Iron Face series and how it was a strong follow-up following Ethan as the main character. Ethan is Megan's little brother as he traverses the world of the Fae, reuniting with his sister and essentially going on his own adventures within that particular world and environment. And it was a high stakes series. I really, really enjoyed it. And it's hard for me. I definitely want to put it in A tier. But whether I put it above the Iron Fae or whether I put it below, I actually preferred Call of the Forgotten over certain elements of the Iron Fae series. I like them both, but if I had to make a preference, I thought some of the cliffhangers and some of the rolling action of the Call of the Forgotten was actually really well done. So I would say personal preference, they're probably on equal footing, but I will put it above the ranking for the Iron Fae. Just put it in A tier and on the level of this. I will leave these two where they are. Next one I want to feature is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. Okay, so this starts with Cinder. I have not finished reading this particular series. I liked it. I liked several elements of it, but I don't have, considering I have not finished this respective series, I don't have enough information to be able to put it, to rank it among these other series. So I know I'm behind the bit in terms of how many people love the Lunar Chronicles with its cyber elements and its protagonist and its representation. We will put this under series that I want to finish. I will put it basically behind, like, in the spectrum of series I want to finish, so I'll leave that there. So I'll leave that where it is. So which leaves me with not too many series left to go. So we still have several different series here that I have chosen. Um, the Mortal Instruments series. Okay, so this is by Cassandra Clare. This is DOA. Very firmly DOA. I read the first two books of the Mortal Instruments series and I could not continue. It was not one of my favorite series. I did not care for several of the characters. I found them to be infuriating. And certain elements of the plot line, the incest plot line, was not my favorite at all in terms of the dynamic, nor was the love triangle. So even though I don't mind love triangles at all, like that's not the issue I had with that particular series. I just did not really gravitate towards the Mortal Instruments. I liked Infernal Devices a lot better in terms of the elements of the urban fantasy aspect of it. That was more the Mortal Instruments was more contemporary. The Infernal Devices was more historical. And I'm guessing that that was kind of like the leaning, like in terms of stuff, but there were certain elements of the Mortal Instruments where I was just like, yeah, I'm done. I've read two books. I think I'm done. Cassandra Clare's not an author for me. So DOA unfinished for the Mortal Instruments. Next one is the Poison Heart series, which is by Caitlin Barron. I really enjoyed the very first book in the Poison Heart series, and there's two books out for it right now. I think I feel good enough with being able to say that this is definitely B tier for me and high B tier in terms of the appeal of the characters and the world building and the elements in terms of how it follows its protagonist who inherits her aunt's legacy and develops powers of her own that are appealing, as well as the relationships and strongly drawn characters within it. Would I put it above Dread Nation or In a Blade So Black? Would I put it even above Daughters of the Moon? I've only read one book in the series. I've started the second one and I like it so far, but I have not finished that second book in the series, which is, I think, called Our Wicked Fate. I think I feel comfortable enough putting this behind Dread Nation in terms of its respective elements for what it offered. It could definitely go higher with respect to me finishing the second book in the series. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the protagonist and the writing and the overall arcing elements of it. And I look forward to reading more of Caitlin Barron's work in the future. But I feel pretty good with putting it in a strong B tier ranking. Let's look at Tithe. Tithe is a series by Holly Black that I read many, many years ago. And it's been long enough to where I don't remember certain elements of it. I remember I liked it, but I remember I didn't love it. It had caveats to it. I think I feel comfortable with putting it as B tier with a series that I like, but had caveats. And I'll put it above Warrior Princess. It does very well with its Fae elements and YA fantasy within that particular vein. I just don't feel confident about my memory on the series, respectively, to be able to rank it higher than B tier. So we'll leave it at that specifically for this particular ranking. Next book is a YA dystopian series called Uglies by Scott Westerfield. A lot of people know about this particular series, and this is the old cover for it. I believe the covers have been redesigned, and I actually really like the newer cover design of this particular series for what it offered. I would say, like, I have read 2.5 books in this respective series so far, and I have enough of an opinion to be able to say that I liked it for what it offered. Did I like it? It's definitely B tier, but where would I rank it is the question. I liked it better than Across the Universe. I liked it better than Tithe, and I liked it better than Warrior Princess. Though any of those could potentially move up as I finish reading and revisiting those series. Do I like it more than Infernal Devices? is the question. Do I like it as much as Dustlands? Hmm. Yeah, I can say that I'll put it behind Dustlands. It was a strong dystopian series for what it offered for that for as far as I got into it. I've read 2.5 books. I do plan on finishing the series. It could go higher. It could even go lower than some of these series, but I think it fits pretty firmly within B tier for YA fantasy for the dystopian elements. I would argue that there are certain other dystopian YA books that do the themes of uglies a lot better than what it did for certain things. I liked it, but there are certain caveats to it. Now, if you want to talk about a YA dystopian fantasy that did very well with its respective elements, Unwind by Neil Shusterman was excellent in terms of things. So I would put that very firmly in A tier for how I loved its respective elements. Now, where I would put it is the question. Hmm. In terms of how it personally influenced me, in terms of the way that it was vividly drawn, I've read 3 out of the 4 of this respective series, and I thought it was very strong for what it offered. I still need to revisit the series and review it for myself, but if I were to say in terms of where I would put it, we can put it, I would say like I'd put it like even like probably as high as here. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with putting it like here in terms of YA dystopian novels. It was very, very strong, which means do I really want to leave Six of Crows here? Do I want to leave Six of Crows here? Let's move Six of Crows up to right behind Sabriel. Yeah, we can do that. Do I want to move up any of these other ones in terms of rearranging things? Hmm, it's a good question. I feel pretty good about leaving the order of where this is right now. So I'll leave it as is, controversial as it may be. In terms of like where things are, Sabriel is definitely one of the series that I love and enjoy, like from quite some a long time. Six of Crows is one of my newer favorites. Hunger Games, very quintessential classic. Unwind was very good. Chaos Walking influenced me a lot. Anna series definitely did. The Iron Fae series definitely did. Cemetery Boys is a new favorite, and then the Good Luck Girls was very well done as well. So I feel pretty good about that A tier ranking. So we'll keep it moving. We don't have too much more to go. Oh gosh. So let's talk about Vampire Academy. Why? Probably one of the other YA vampire series that is mentioned on this. I actually really enjoyed Vampire Academy the more that I went into it. It really did not start off strong for me. I think I gave the first book in the series 2 stars. And then as I went through the respective series, I read all of the books in the series, so I have finished it. I would say that as it went on, it definitely intrigued me at the time that I read it, and I really enjoyed it for what it offered. But would I put it among each of these in terms of influence? It's a good question in terms of. I feel pretty good about putting it in B tier. The question is, where would I put it in B tier for it to be do I put it? I feel like it feels like it was a better series in terms of where it overarchingly went compared to the Dustlands trilogy, but it was not as good as I would say Graceland was, or any of the ones that came above it in terms of factoring for these. So I feel pretty good about putting it behind Graceland, but above Dusklands and any of the ones that were in B tier in terms of stuff. It was a strong series for what it offered in terms of the world building and essentially how it stuck with me, but I wonder if it would go even lower than what it is if I decided to pick it up again and reread it, given how long it's been since I've read it. But we'll see. I may read several of the books from Vampire Academy just to be able to see, what my impressions of it are now compared to when I read it before, but I feel pretty good about putting it in B tier. Let's see, Wake by Lisa McMahon. This was a trilogy that I read all the books for. It wasn't ultimately my cuppa because of certain elements of it that didn't sit well with me. I would put it definitely above Divergent and Aragon and Life as We Knew It. Would I put it above Twilight? In terms of average rating, I think I gave an overall average rating to Twilight higher than Wake. At least like in terms of Twilight, I think like my average rating of the Wake series in terms of the paranormal elements about a girl who enters people's dreams and sees some sinister witnesses some sinister elements was appealing. The appeal of the Wake series by Melissa McMahon um was very high. I think the execution of it was not what I expected it to be or as strong as I thought it would be, but do I put it above Twilight or not? Uh, we can put it behind Twilight. I'll leave it at there because it was fine. It was fine, but it wasn't my cuppa. Next one that I want to feature is a YA sci-fi series that I don't think gets enough love from people. This is War Girls by Tochi Onyebuchi. I loved every bit of the first book of this respective duology. It is a duology. The first book is War Girls. The second book is Rebel Sisters, and it's essentially like an alternate. It's a futuristic history of in which two sisters are fighting in a war-torn a futuristic Nigeria where they're fighting to be together, and I really enjoyed the first book for the world building, for all the respective elements that it had to this respective series. I think I would definitely put this in A tier, but the question is where would I put it in A tier compared to everybody else in terms of things. I feel like it's definitely one of my more recent favorites if I were to say both books and put that on the channel. Do I put this as one of my more recent favorites or do I put it towards the lower bit? I think I feel pretty good about putting this. Um, it is a duology, so I would say like I would probably put it above The Good Luck Girls and slightly below Cemetery Boys. I would like to read the follow-up to Cemetery Boys. You can't really compare Cemetery Boys with War Girls because they're two different narratives, but from what I understand, Cemetery Boys is also a duology, and War Girls is a duology, and The Good Luck Girls are a duology. So I think about it within the spectrum of how long the series is and the appeal of the first book to me within each of the three ones here. So I would say that in terms of my ranking, Cemetery Boys, War Girls, and Good Luck Girls makes sense in terms of the ranking here. So I would say definitely A tier. War Girls was very well done. I try to recommend that series to whoever I know because it's so underrated and so well done. And I think more people should definitely read it. More people should definitely read it. Last book that I want to feature is another YA fantasy with Fae elements, which I read a lot of YA fantasy with Fae apparently. Wicked Lovely, I have read a few books with. It was okay. I have not finished it. I don't know if I want to feel comfortable enough with ranking it among my other reads for this respective video. So what I will do is I will put this under series I want to finish and I will give you my thoughts about it when I get back to it. And I think we are done with this tier ranking video. So essentially, I put two under my all-time favorites, and this is pretty consistent with anyone who knows me in terms of my all-time favorite series, in terms of the ones that I have either finished or almost finished. Shadow Shaper, I have one more book to finish in it, and then I'll be done. And I feel pretty confident that is among my all-time favorites. This is my A tier ranking. Sabriel is definitely one of my favorites. Six of Crows, Hunger Games, Unwind, Chaos Walking, Anna, Call of the Forgotten for the Iron Fae series, Cemetery Boys, War Girls, and the Good Luck Girls. And I feel like all of these feel pretty solid in terms of my A tier ranking. Series that I like, but with caveats, this makes sense. I feel pretty good about it. I hate the fact that I put both Clockwork Princess and Clockwork Angel, even though that's from the same series. So technically speaking, I liked Clockwork Princess a lot more than Clockwork Angel, but the overarching Infernal Devices series, I think I liked it overall, but with caveats, but I'm not picking up anything else from Cassandra Clare. I think I'm good to go with leaving that series where it is and leaving the Shadowhunter series just where it is in terms of my experiences with it. Not My Cuppa, Twilight, Wake, Divergent, Aragon, and the Life as We Know It series. I forgot what the respective series for that by Susan Beth Pfeiffer was, but yeah. DOA Unfinished made sense for the Half Bad trilogy, the House of Night series, Red Queen, and Immortal Instruments. Yeah, I think all of those feel pretty solidly D tier. And then these are all the series that I want to finish. So I have a lot of work ahead of me to be able to finish the series that I want to finish in this. So that is it for this respective video. Thank you for watching. I feel this was a pretty good video, a pretty long video too in terms of things. I feel pretty confident about all of my choices, and I don't believe that this is the only tier ranking for YA, fantasy, and sci-fi, because I have so many more series that I wanted to feature in the spectrum of this video, but I just did not get a chance to be able to talk about all of them. So this will probably be one in a series of tier ranking videos that I cover on the channel. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be informed of when I post new videos on the channel. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.